speaking Spanish. Spanish wasn't regulated the same as in English. And so I do think we need to take a look at that. Again, our work is just beginning. But I want to talk about what you just said about the women. The women of color showed up in big ways. Of course, you saw in Georgia what Black women have done, but the Latina women were the real heroines here, beating men in turnout in every state and voting for Biden-Harris at an average rate close to 3-1. And that wasn't surprising to us. You know, Latinos are the CEOs of the households. They make all the financial decisions and healthcare decisions and educational decisions. Many Latinas are small business owners, and they wanted a plan for recovery for themselves, not for Wall Street. And so Trump's policies were never aimed at the struggling Latina community. And, you know, if you look at voter suppression on top of that, how Latinas showed up, even through the closing of polling places and the shutting down of drop-off sites and new voter ID laws and long lines and driving 30 miles and all of that. And on top of that, restrictions and safety protocols of a pandemic. That spirit and perseverance that Latinas use in their daily lives, the struggle to pay their bills and the struggle to show up to their jobs and homeschool their kids and take care of their elders, that's the same perseverance and spirit they use to show up at the polls.
To the extent that my campaign helped activate our community, I am incredibly proud. Just like you all should be proud of what you did on Election Day. Joe Biden, I just checked it out in the car, I looked at the final tally. Joe Biden won Georgia by 12,000 votes. And Asian Americans went 2-1 for Joe over Donald Trump. So you could say that Asian Americans decided this election here in Georgia for Joe Biden. Almost half of those Asian Americans had never voted before. And that, I know, is due not just to me, but to the hard work that organizers like you all have done trying to get the word out in our communities that voting matters, that American politics are incredibly important, not just...
You are live with King Sigma. Today is May 30, 2021. Everyone is out there celebrating Memorial Weekend. I hope the weather is nice where you are, because the weather is kind of shoddy here. You know, we've had a cold spell. So hopefully you guys are all up there on the beach enjoying the weather if you happen to catch the sun rays this weekend. But today we're going to get into this yellow is the new black trend that's pretty much taken the American media narrative by storm the last 3 months. But for some reason, the 2020 census information didn't really start to spread until the last 2 weeks or so. And because of some other issues that were taking the attention of the media over the last month or so, these data points just haven't really been talked about. So if you all know someone out there that's been talking about the actual statistics related to the Asian population, salute to them. But if the panel that I was on last night is any indicator, so I was on Mr. Fantastic's panel, and we got into this globalization conversation, and I had mentioned the fact that in 2021, Asian Americans are now 7% of the United States population. That is a bombshell if you're someone that's been following demographics for any amount of time. For the most part, many of us had been using the data from 2010 because pretty much every study that had come out, all the surveys were mostly using information from the 2010 U.S. Census. But now that we have this 2020 information, there are definitely some bombshells in there. But for me, to see the Asian American population double from 2010 to 2020 is incredible. Because again, so much of the focus have been on the Latino population and its growth, which the 2020 census had their number at just about 20%. But that's the official number. I'm almost certain, based on other surveys that I've seen from states, that the Latino population is way closer to probably 25%. if not more. But I'm just going to be conservative and say this 20% Latino population number, I highly doubt that that's accurate as it could be. So I'm thinking that it's probably closer to 25% at this point. But all the conversation all during the election was about Latinos and their population growth. But the real conversation is about Asian American. The Asian American population doubled. And even from the census analysts, they were saying that it's actually Asian Americans who are the fastest growing group in America. And that's new information to many people. And again, if you were in the chat in that panel or on that panel last night of Mr. Fantastics, which you should go check out when you get a chance, everyone else was surprised too. And these are well-informed brothers and audience members that are usually up to date. But again, for some reason, this one slipped through. And I kind of want to go through a report that was put out by NPR this weekend talking about this data about Asian Americans. But a big conversation that was had over the last 3 months was in regards to a quote unquote alleged violence against Asian Americans. And for me, we're going to have to dig into that a little bit. This claim of Asian hate, because I've never, ever in my life seen a bill pushed through the U.S. Congress with the speed by which that S-937 bill was pushed through. And the name of that bill was called the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. And that bill was pushed through within 60 days. And I never seen a bill pushed through that quickly, because there is a bill that I've been following for years called the Racial Profiling Act bill. And I've been following that bill for at least 5 years, and it still has never made it to a vote in the Senate or a full vote in Congress. So that's pretty incredible that a population that went from 3% they were 3% in the year 2000, and now they're at 7%. But the ability of them to harness their agenda and position themselves with their supposed allies, because again, as you saw in the clip with Andrew Yang taking credit for that Georgia victory, which is it's definitely not a fact that Asians were the ones that pushed Georgia. That state, it was blacks. It was black men and black women, but specifically black women that got that victory in that Senate race in Georgia. But somehow this small group, they're taking credit for it. And then you also saw with the Eva Longoria clip where she was, she got that mic put in front of her on MSNBC, and she was quick to say it was Latinas. It was Latinas that gave Biden the victory. So it is amazing that these other groups, they're quick to talk about black and brown coalitions and this or that. But it's pretty clear to me that the black majority literally has become the mascot of the Democratic Party, specifically as in being that mule. The black vote is really the mule vote for other interests at this point. And I'm sorry to say it. And I'm someone that up until the 2020 election, because the first president I voted for was Barack Obama. But I didn't vote for him in his second term. I voted for a third party. And this time around, I actually voted for Donald Trump. So that's kind of how my political evolution has gone. And now I'm back to independent status. I don't have any political preference, but that's kind of the trajectory of my vote over this last 10 years or so. So I've gone from being a Democrat and to being someone that voted third party, thinking that was a solution. Then I voted for Donald Trump. He lost. And now here we are. So we're in this situation where we've been told all this time that Latinos was the fastest growing immigration policy. That was an accepted thing in the mainstream. No one was talking about Asian immigration. But now, boom, 2020 census data comes out. So many things that we've been told are myths and lies and propaganda. These Asian Americans, they're moving fast. But it was only because they were able to utilize the black social advocacy on issues that have been pushed for the black majority, but never got passed, that they were able to harness that political energy and get that bill pushed through in 60 days. For you all that follow congressional, shenanigans that they stay into, and they're always talking, that for them to push a bill through the House and the Senate in 60 days, that's impressive. So I want to get into this article that NPR put out. So I'm going to share my screen with you all so we can walk through this together. So let's see. So hopefully you all can see the screen right now. That is definitely one of the flaws of StreamYard that I hope that they fix. They should have an option where when you share a screen, you can also see the comments in a separate window, but they haven't created that technology yet. But hopefully they do that, because that'll be great if when we open a screen, we can actually see a window of the comments, so we can know that the audience is able to see and keep and tag along with us through the screen share. Okay, so I was able to go to YouTube, and you guys are saying that you can see the screen. So here's the article that came out from NPR, and it's called 6 Charts That Dismantle the Trope of Asian Americans as a Model Minority. So as many of you know, it was Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month for the month of May. And there was just a bunch of, thought pieces, information, campaigns, commercials that were dedicated to Asian Americans during the month of May. And it's kind of almost like a symbolic thing that COVID-19 hate bill was passed as well in May. So they know how to move, because again, they have a clear agenda, they have a clear identity, and they know how to harness themselves onto the bigger social groups, movements. It's kind of incredible. And you kind of see that happening right now with Andrew Yang, and we'll talk about that a little bit, what he's doing in New York and how he's the front runner for that mayoral seat and what that represents on the back of this new explosive census data. So with this 6 charts that dismantle the trope of Asian Americans as a model minority, NPR does a good job of showing how so much of what we've been told about this monolithic Asian American group isn't true. And, just in terms of like where they're at economically, their political orientations, and how they're moving. But there's definitely been a lot of focus on these Asian Americans and Latinos. And for the Black majority, it's pretty much like the final, the final seconds of the fourth quarter, at this point. Because again, when you look at those numbers in terms of population growth and density in the in urban areas versus rural, what stood out to me, and this was another important part of the demographic information from the census, was that Black Americans' growth since 1990 as a population was only 1%. Yes. In about 30 years, the native Black American population has only grown by 1%. Now, when you actually filter the Black population by those that are native Black Americans, or some people say foundational Black Americans, others say ADOS, others say descendants of America, say whatever you want to say. I just say native Black Americans. Their population is actually shrinking. And of course, we know in this space that the abortion has played a huge role in that, because we're going to cross around 25 million abortions sometime before 2024, if it hasn't already crossed. But I know last time I checked the information, because again, with COVID, it's hard to say what happened this last 12 months, but it was definitely on a trajectory to hit 25 million sometime between 2022 and 2024, based on the numbers before COVID. But when you look at the Black population at 1% of growth, the last 30 years, all the growth has come from Black immigration into the United States from Africa, the Caribbean, or other countries. So I think that's important. So from the outside, it looks like the Black population has just been the same. It just stayed the same. While everyone else's populations are growing, it would look like, oh, well, the Black population has just stayed the same, about 12%, 13%. But that's not the true story. The actual native Black population, when you take out biracials, who now are identified in the census as biracial now, and then you take out non-Native Black Americans who are coming from foreign countries, we're talking about the Native Black American population is probably 9 to 10% at this point. So that's something I'm definitely going to be digging into in the next couple of weeks, is really trying to figure out what the true number is, but it's definitely closer to like 9 to 10%. But the Asian Americans, again, in 1990, for example, they were 2% of the population. So they went from 1990, 2% to now pushing towards 8%. Because again, with the immigration bills that I heard Joe Biden talking about, he's bringing in a lot more. And I'll bring up some files on that as well. But the white population in 1990 was 84%. The Latino population was 9%. Black population was 12%. Asians 2%. And again, in 2020, the white population is 76%. The Latino population is said to be 19%, which I really believe is much higher than that. The Black population is 13%, but Native Blacks probably more like 10 or 9. And the Asians are pushing towards 8%, and biracials are at 3%. So that's the current demographic shift over the last 30 years that for the most part it's really not been talked about to the extent that it should have been. So let's look at what NPR says. So they start off smart, hardworking, nice. Those were among the adjectives that respondents offered up in a recent poll when asked to describe Asian Americans. The poll conducted by the nonprofit Leading Asian Americans to Unite for Change, Launch, was another all too familiar reminder that Asian Americans are still perceived as the model minority. Since the end of World War II, this myth about Asian Americans and their perceived collective success has been used as a racial wedge to minimize the role racism plays in the struggle of other minority groups, such as Black Americans. Characterizing Asian Americans as a model minority flattens the diverse experiences of Asian Americans into a singular, narrow narrative, and it paints a misleading picture about the community that doesn't align with current statistics. Here's a look at common misconceptions driven by the model minority myth. So they're going to go on to show different myths, but I want to check in with the chat just to see that you guys are in the same place that I'm at. So let's see what chat is saying. So the brother Brian Watchley said that I voted for Trump. I didn't trust Biden or his light-skinned side piece, for real. Shout out to you, Iman Perry says, happy Sunday. Happy Sunday to you, brother. Happy Memorial Weekend. Gushy says the Asian and Latino population is going to explode over the next couple of years. Oh, it's going to explode. We're going to get into that, bro, because I got the receipts today. Because, again, I usually consider myself to be well informed about what's going on, but I have to be honest that this one passed by me. I was surprised because, again, I was under the impression that the Asian population was still around 4%, but it doubled, and that was even under Trump. So with Biden's immigration policies, which I'm going to share with you all, that population by 2030, it's almost a certainty that the Latinos will be about 35% of the population, even officially, in 10 years. And the Asian Americans will either be on par with where the total Black population is, where it's at around 12 or 13%. Asians will be about there. If they don't surpass it with some of these Biden policies, they might even pass, but I doubt it in 10 years. But in 20 years, yes, they will surpass Black Americans' population where things are. But by 2030, Asian Americans will be on par, equal in population numbers with Blacks. Because again, remember, the biracials are more and more identifying themselves now as biracial. So that trend is going to grow as this people of color becomes the term now. I actually hear Black people use that term now. And I'm stunned because I call myself a native Black American. I'm not with this people of color crap. But I actually have had conversation with people and they'll use that term. You're like, oh, a people of color. I'm like, what do you mean people of color? Like, were they Asian? Were they Black? What? Oh, they were Black. But then they can also be talking about an Asian or an Indian or something like that when they use that term, people of color. So that's where this thing is going now. This people of color term is overtaking the signifier of Black. And that's not going to be a good thing for the Black majority going forward, as this data is going to show. So let's get back to that article. So the first myth says Asian Americans are a single monolithic group. Currently, More than 22 million people of Asian descent live in the US, making up approximately 7% of the nation's population. They trace their heritage to different regions around the world, with people of East Asian and Southeast Asian descent making up the largest shares, though no group makes up a majority. More than 1.5 million Pacific Islanders who descend from Micronesia, Melanesia, or Polynesia live in the US as well. So here's a nice graph they put together. So this is like a color mapping of the current Asian American population and where they trace their heritages to. So as you can see in the top left, that's what the South Asian population, and then there's the South or Southeast Asian in the left quadrant, upper left quadrant. In the right upper quadrant, you have South Asian. So it looks like they're about equal as representing the percentages of the total Asian American population. Then you have in the lower left quadrant, you have the smallest group that identifies as the Pacific Islanders, and the largest group seems to be from East Asian countries. So, guys, go ahead and take a look at that chart one more time before I move on. So it goes on to say that academics and activists trace the term Asian American to 1968, when students at the University of California, Berkeley, founded the Asian American Political Alliance. At the time, the group sought to unite students of Japanese, Chinese, and Filipino descent to fight for political and social recognition. AAPI is a term that has its roots in the 1980s and 90s, representing Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. When the U.S. Census Bureau used the Asian Pacific American classification to group Asians, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders together. In 1997, the Census Bureau disaggregated the categories into Asian and Pacific Islander. Scholars and activists have critiqued both terms for masking differences in histories and needs among communities, as well as supporting the myth that Asian Americans are a monolithic group. With these regional groups, a huge variety of ethnicities exists within the Asian American community. People who identify their heritage as Chinese, Indian, or Filipino make up the largest share. Now, I find that interesting because, every time that Black Americans have tried to identify themselves as Native Black Americans, we have this foundational Black Americans, American descendants of slave, whatever. It's just everyone talks about, oh, these people are being divisive, or it's about everybody. We all got to work together, this and that. But as you can see, even amongst this growing Asian American demographic, they want their specific ethnicity and identifier to be official. So if they're Indian American, for example, they want to be called Indian American. They don't want to be called just Asian American. That may be the umbrella term, but they don't want their cultural identity to be lost. And it's just crazy. No one makes any argument against it, because you shouldn't make an argument. But when the Native Black Americans, the mules of America, when they say, you know what, I'm not feeling this African American designation, I'm not feeling this people of color, we're Native Black Americans, and our lineage is at the foundation of the United States, preceding the United States. Because again, the United States didn't become a country until like 1789 or whatnot, officially with the Constitution. But prior to that, they were the colonies of British for damn near 200 plus years, 280 years or something like that. They were colonies, and Blacks had been here even under that regime of the British and even before. But it's just amazing to me that when Black Americans say, I'm a Native Black American, I refuse to let anyone call me people of color. I've told people that in person. I am a Native Black American. And I had a woman that I've been dealing with, and she was using that term. And I told her, no, specifically, I'm Native Black American. I had to educate her on, no, I'm not African American. I'm a Native Black American. So respect that distinction. But they're washing away Black Americans' right to speak up in that way and to have their identity and to attach it to what's at the foundation of the United States. They want to take that away, that anchor away from Black America for some reason. They want to put us in a box with every other group. But then when they actually allocate resources, those resources are going to those other groups, as we saw with the COVID-19 bill being pushed through in 60 days. That is incredible that they were able to do that. So again, you guys can say whatever you want about what your voting preferences is, but again, you are the mule vote of the United States as things stand in 2021. That's the status you have. You can buy into all these tiers at the borders that you want to, kids in cages, yada yada yada. But the issues that are most imperative to the Black majority are being pushed and isolated completely out of the national conversation. And it's just amazing that you reading right here in NPR. This article just came out this weekend, and they're saying, yeah, we'll get on board with the Asian American identity when it's convenient, but officially, you're going to give us our designation individually as well. And the census has changed that quickly, very, very quickly. So let me go back to the article, The Next Myth. So they kind of got another chart showing the exact numbers. So here we have the many ethnicities fall under the Asian American umbrella. So the East Asian population in the United States is 8.6 million as of this census. We see that the Chinese, so I believe, let me see, it says, okay. So the biggest individual ethnic group within the Asian American identity, according to the census, is actually Chinese. They represent 4.9 million of the population. So the East Asian segment is the largest segment of the Asian American population. The Koreans coming in at 1.9 million, Japanese 1.5 million, Taiwanese 204K. Now pay attention to the Taiwanese, because that's what Andrew Yang identifies himself as. He identifies as a Taiwanese American. So remember that. They're at around 204,000 right now. So we go to Southeast Asian. They're the second largest demographic at 7.6 million people. And this group is made up of Filipinos, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Thai, Hmong, Laotian, Burmese, and Indonesian. And their largest group is the Filipinos at 4 million, followed by Vietnamese, 2.1 million, Cambodian, 322,000, Thai at 313,000, Hmong. We have a lot of Hmongs out here in the upper Midwest. They're at 309,000, Laotians 261,000, Burmese 182K, Indonesian 120K. So then the third largest group amongst this Asian American umbrella is the South Asian, 5.3 million people. Now this is where you get your Indians, your Pakistani, your Bangladeshi, and your Nepalese. So there are, I mean, I didn't know their numbers were this large, bro. I did not know there were 4.3 million Indians. I just didn't. I thought the numbers were much lower. Then you have Pakistani, they're at 500,000. Bangladeshi, 188K. Nepalese, 168K. And then you have the smallest demographic amongst the Asian American umbrella, the Pacific Islanders. They're at 1.5 million people, and they have more of a concentration on the West Coast states, you know, Hawaii, California, Seattle, things like that. The Samoan population, 209K. Guamanian or Chamorro, 159K, and other Pacific Islanders, 253K. So as you can see, these numbers have risen rapidly in recent years. That's even how NPR is going. These numbers have risen rapidly in recent years. The Asian American population is the fastest growing racial or ethnic group in the U.S., growing by 81% from 2000 to 2019. Now imagine if the Black American population had grown by 81% over the last 20 years. Everybody and their mama would have known it happened. There wouldn't have been no ability to keep this out of the public conversation. Can you imagine if the Black population had grown by 80% in the last 20 years? How much of dialogue would have been about that? Everybody would be talking about it. It would be known to the whole world. But maybe I'm the dummy here, but I didn't know. And it appears that NPR is shocked as well, because they're saying that it rose rapidly. And that's why they're using the conservative language, but they're letting you know they're shocked too. So the Hispanic population saw the second fastest growth at 70%, followed by Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders at 60%. The white population grew by only 1% in that time. Now, you guys see who they left out of that conversation? Did you see how they talked about these other groups' growth, but whose growth is not on that chart for some reason? You don't see nothing about Black Americans. See, this is what I'm saying. The games they play with us, man. Why would you not show? You showed what the white growth was, 1%. But I already told you guys, that the black population has only grown by 1%. And it isn't the native population, it's immigrants. See, it's this game that they play with blacks. Even while they're giving you all this data, why would you not put right there? The black population grew by 1%. You got white, you got Latino, you got Hispanic, everyone else. But the blacks ain't talked about. No, we can't let black Americans out there know. Your population is sinking and decreasing every decade. It hasn't grown at all in 40 years. But all these other populations are growing. Except for whites dropped, but not to the amount that everyone claims. The way that you hear the tears and the pearl clutching in the media, you would think that the white population had dropped from 85% in 1990 to like 50%. We're dying. The Latinos are taking over the Asian. No, they had a drop from 84% to 76%, and they're already talking about ways to minimize that. Because I was already hearing dialogues coming from the Immigration Bureau where they were saying they're going to open their borders up to more white Europeans. So they're going to be bringing in everyone's been so focused on Latinos that they haven't been looking at these other groups that are being planned to bring in. And we already know that a lot of Latinos identify as white as well coming in too. So they're going to be bringing in a lot of what they would call white Latinos from countries like Colombia, Venezuela, and countries that have that real strong white Latino population. They're going to be coming in and they'll be identified as white. But again, they're going to be bringing in white Europeans as well. Those that are trying to escape some of those European countries, they're about to open those borders up. And again, I was hearing that they were shutting down a lot of the immigration from some African countries recently, like Nigeria, Haiti, and things like that. They're saying, hey, we don't want your black ass here. But yet, these Asian population is damn near pushing 8% of the population in 20 years, and no one talks about it. It's crazy. I just find it funny that they don't, it's right there. The white population grew by only 1% in that time, but nothing about what's happening with the black Americans. Mules of the left. So we go to the next myth. Asian Americans are high earning and well educated. So it says Asian Americans have a median household income of around $78,000 a year, which is higher than the national median of about $66,000. So now you guys let that number burn in your mind where the median is in America right now. So the median in 2021 in America for all groups collective is 66,000. And I swear, like the last time I saw the census, that number was probably like 48,000 in 2010 or something. So you've seen how that's gone. So if you're all looking at your current career and where you are financially in your job, you have to ask yourself over the last 10 years, have you been keeping up? Because, there's also you got to make that adjustment for inflation. And we know that right now we're in like one of the worst inflationary moments in probably 20 years right now. Because, I was looking at the price of cars right now because I'm looking to upgrade, before probably August to a new vehicle. And man, the cost of vehicles right now is up 20% for used vehicles because of numerous factors. But we know the main reason, COVID pandemic, but there's so many shortages. And that's one of the reasons why they're forcing people to go back to work and they're cutting unemployment. Because like, hey, we have a labor shortage now, which is the price of like chicken wings, things that have to be produced in mass. Man, they've skyrocketed because there's such a lower supply right now. So keep asking yourself, hey, has my wages and my income been going up with this big jump that's going up? And remember, this is going to be the next 2 years is going to be very inflationary. And we've seen it in the prices of food, but specifically in things like cars. Because you got used cars that some of the ones that I was looking at just 30 days ago. So let's say the car was like 15,000. And this is like, 2 or 3 years old is what I'm looking for. A car that's about 2 or 3 years old to upgrade to. And the price of it had went up. They had, I looked in my little car garage that I keep online to see the cars that I'm following with the dealers. And the prices, instead of going down, which they usually would in a 30-day period, they went up by like matching the consumer price index, about 17 to 20%. So it's happening. It's happening right now. So just pay attention to what the new median is in America, 66,000 as a group. But yet Asian Americans, theirs is 12,000 above what the median is for the rest of the country. So they're doing something right. So it says that overall statistic obscures large differences among different Asian origin groups. These economic disparities are partially driven by similar disparities in education levels among Asian Americans. The highest earning groups, Indian American And Taiwanese American households, the group that Andrew Yang is a part of, and another mystery person that I'm going to mention, the connection between Andrew Yang and another Taiwanese American, also have the highest levels of education. Now, that's key. While the lowest earning groups have comparatively lower levels of education, that's critical right there when they bring in the highest levels of education piece. That's very important because in the state of California, for example, I was reading about how the state is trying to get rid of their standardized testing because the Asian Americans are scoring higher than the whites there and everyone else, of course. But the Asian Americans are so dominant from an academic standpoint in how they prepare themselves to succeed and the structure they've put in place in their own family households, they're surpassing the whites in states like California and New York to a point where the white said, hey, we got to get rid of this standardized testing because these Asians have figured this thing out. They're doing better than our children. They're getting more seats at these universities, even our own children. So when you talk about like blacks, they're not even in discussion in California because they can't produce a competitive, youthful product for those campuses anyways. So what they said they're doing now, they're going to move towards a legacy model, a holistic model. And that is going to cause like a whole bunch of problems. Because if you take out the objective standard test that everyone takes, so let's say SAT, right? That's an objective test. Anyone can go prepare for the SAT. You know, take certain classes, read certain books. You can prepare yourself. That's all it is. I've done it, and many people in the chat prepared ourselves for it. Others didn't. So they're using blacks as an excuse. And I think this is an embarrassment. They're using Black American students as an excuse to say, oh, we're getting rid of this objective testing because the Black students can't compete when you put in objective testing. The Black child student is so dumb, he can't do math. She can't read. He can't do analytical reasoning. He can't do reading comprehension. Because the Black student is so damn dumb, we got to get rid of this standardized testing because it discriminates against people that have those kind of skills of reading comprehension, test preparation. It discriminates against them. So they're used, again, blacks are the mules of the United States. Asians have found a way to do on these tests that are in English to perform better than the white native population and everyone else. But yet they're saying, well, these tests discriminate against blacks. They always throw blacks into these things. So you blacks are so stupid. We better get rid of this testing. And what you guys are going to see, the worst thing they can do is get rid of the testing. Because guess what happens? When you take away the most important objective factor for admissions, now you leave it to subjective, like that case in Atlanta where they had the thing with under that mayor where they were faking GPAs and things like that. One of the benefits of an objective test is that it has the best ability to filter out the cheating kind of thing because they use IDs. So, you know, there's no perfect system, but they have IDs. Now they're doing like social security cards. They can increase the security measures to match the threat. But when you take out the objective thing now, you just leave it to the teachers. So let's say you have students, they'll just say, well, how do you weight an A in like English versus how do you weight an A in a scientific course, right? Like an A in an English course is much easier to earn than it is to earn an A in a calculus course. And I know you've all been there. Then, you know, the struggle is real with calculus and algebra, you know, the real hard mathematics. So now you leaving this up to the admissions people, because if they have one student who all they took was gym, but they have a 4.0 in gym, but then you got another person who has a 3.4, and all the classes that student took were in the hardest sciences in high school, which these Asians are representing. That I don't get it. How you say, oh, that person got a 4.0 in gym. That's why they had the standardized test there, because that was a fair weight. Because if you have two students with the subjective measurements, it's harder to compare them. But when you throw in the standardized test, say, okay, you're all taking the same test, and you all have as long to prepare for it as you need. So it's going to come down to preparation directly for the test, but also in the kind of understudies that you took during your freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years of high school, because you usually take that test either during your senior year of high school or right before your senior year of high school with the SAT and the ACTs. So what's going to be important for passing those tests is how you prepare for the test itself, but more importantly, what are your foundational classes that you took during prior 3 years before you sit down and take for that test. And now they're saying, you know what? It's really about the whites, but they're using blacks and saying, hey, you black people are too dumb to pass this objective test, so we're going to get rid of it. And guess who's going to benefit? White students. White students are going to benefit. Ain't nothing going to change for the Asian Americans. Because again, the Supreme Court has a case that just finally hit their docket. So that's going to be determined, I believe, either before June this year or sometime next year. This Asian Americans versus Harvard case, it's made its way to the Supreme Court now. So they're going to make a decision on, have Ivy Leagues and other colleges been discriminating against Asians? And just knowing the makeup of the Supreme Court, you can pretty much say it's a done deal on affirmative action in all the 50 contiguous states, because different states had different rules on affirmative actions because of the vagueness that had come down from the Supreme Court over the last 30 years. Because again, they've been trying to protect dealing directly with the issue of black students underperforming because their parents have failed them and the students have failed themselves. That's really what the issue is. So they've went through all these different loops and mazes trying to protect the image of blacks, which you saw. They don't want to talk about black growth rates. They don't want to talk about blacks' grades or whatever. But they use blacks when it's convenient to push certain programs that they want to push that are actually because they don't want it to be exposed with what's going on with the native whites. They're underperforming as well as other groups. So the Asian Americans are surpassing them, taking their seats and putting themselves on the path to dominate the professional fields and the highest income jobs if you take out any racism against them, if you just looked at it just objectively. So, but they're going to use those blacks as the mule, as the shield to push programs that are actually going to benefit whites. Because again, the Asian thing is going to pick up, okay? That's going to pick up as their numbers continue to grow. That's going to pick up. The group that's going to be most harmed is going to be blacks from these policies. So I'll keep going. So, here's a chart, key disparities in income and education among Asian American groups. As you can see, the lowest earning group is this Burmese Asians. So they're somewhere around 43K. Then you look at kind of where the Native Americans. We have a lot of Laotians and Cambodians and Hmongs up here in the upper Midwest. And I told you guys before on a prior stream that in working for the government, something I noticed in the last 5 years is this growth in Asian Americans populations in the workforce and in the government work. And I'm just like, where's all these Asians coming from? Because I was still in this mindset that they were only like 3% of the population in America, but I was wrong. The reason that they're showing up is because their numbers are growing rapidly in the United States, and they're getting themselves in those positions that they can actually be in a union. And then they're using that union money, the union stability to put their children into the best programs. So this is just where things are going. So you kind of see where these Vietnamese, this is the poorer segment of their population. And even the Hmongs have only been in the United States as a group since the late 90s, where their population really started growing because they had like a big immigration push to bring in these Southeast Asian people in the 90s. So look at how they're performing in a 25 to 30 year period. You already have Hmongs pushing their average income to damn near 80K. And it makes sense because, again, I told you, I'm seeing a lot of Laotians and Hmong people and Cambodians in the government jobs. And that's kind of where a lot of the government pay scale is. It's between that 40 and 80K. You'll find that with government work, probably 70% of their jobs are going to be in that range, 45 to 80K kind of range. Because, government pays less in many ways, but they're more stable jobs with better benefits. And some in the federal, at least, they actually pay more in a lot of segments. But generally, with your government, federal, local, and state, it's going to be in that 40 to 80K range for those jobs. And you see, that's where all these Southeast Asians are. This is where the people of color thing comes into play. Oh, we need to hire people of color. It ain't going to be black. What's happening, that's where these Asians in the lower segment they're getting those jobs now. And I'm seeing it in real time. I've told you guys about this before. Well before this census came out, I told you guys about it. Now let's see now you go to, we keep moving over and we see like where the Japanese are. If you go to Japanese and the Chinese, they're in about that 90K range. Now you can just tell by looking at this chart without even knowing where these people work. You can make a guess that they're not in the government as much. These are people that are not, for the most part, in local, state, and federal government. Now you're seeing these are people that are pushing more into the corporate fields, or they're working in hospitals, things like that, because that's usually where that range is. Now you see Filipino. Now Filipino. I've heard from people that live out in California, from brothers out there, that there's a lot of Filipinos that work in hospitals that are in like the nursing field, for example. So it would make sense that you would see the Filipinos right here around 100K. Now, you know what's funny? I've heard people in these spaces talk badly about Filipinos, thinking that they're the poor ones. They talk badly, but now, y'all see, a lot of us were misled, because many of us always thought of the Filipinos as being a much poorer group than what this chart has proven to be the truth. Filipinos are actually higher than Japanese. Now, I want to look in the chat and tell me, how many of you thought that the Filipinos were in America had a higher income than the Japanese? Because I'm gonna be honest, I didn't. Based on what I knew, I would have said Chinese, Japanese had the highest incomes in America for this chart. So to the chat, would you guys have thought that the Filipinos had a higher income than the Japanese? So Turbato says landscaper pays a lot. See, other people are saying that they didn't know either. So I'm not the only one that was kind of lost on one. I always thought that Filipinos were poorer than that, for sure. But again, that's why you do the research. That's why you put yourself out there to learn. So then we see the Indians. I mean, now I have a circle of Indian American associates right now, and I'm not surprised at all by this number. But before I joined this circle of Indian Americans, I actually would have put the Indian Americans below Japanese and Chinese, but I knew they would have been in the top 4 or 5. But it's no way that I thought, before I got involved in this group of Indians, that they were pushing towards that 140K as an average income range. And why it's important that we know these numbers is because of just how the policy with Joe Biden for the Indians. So I'm bringing that up. Hopefully you guys can see this screen, because this is important. Y'all saw the chart, so let's go back to the chart now. So we see that Indian Americans now have the highest income of all Asian Americans in the United States. They're pushing towards 140K in 2021. Why is it important that we understand these Indians? Because of the kind of work they go into. I don't think I've ever met more than a handful of Indian Americans in government work outside of IT. All the Indians I know that work in government, they work in the IT department. I don't see them working in like, the tax revenue, doing analytical work, or even as lawyers or anything like that. But I noticed that whenever you call the help desk, it's Indians working in there. And that's when you see them. They walk in their groups at lunch, handful of Indians, and they're all in, even the females. But then if they're not in IT, they're in the medical fields. Now, look at what Biden was saying after the election. Biden administration likely to provide U.S. citizenship to over 500,000 Indians. So I just want to read a snippet of that with you guys, because we can see how this all connects. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden, and this is coming from the Indian Times as well. Joe Biden will work towards providing a roadmap to American citizenship for nearly 11 million undocumented immigrants, including over 500,000 from India, and will also establish a minimum admission number of 95,000 refugees annually. Now remember, he said minimum. That means that they for sure from these groups are going to be bringing in 95,000 annually, but he could end up being 5 million. And I'm going to show you why I think it's going to be closer to the millions number, because I got another document to share with y'all. So it says, as a largely immigrant community, but in some cases with American roots reaching back generations, Indian Americans know firsthand the strength and resilience that immigrants bring to the United States of America, according to a policy document issued by the Biden campaign. So I'm going to leave that there, but I wanted you guys to see. So you don't take my word for it. Take the Indian Times word for it. That was like the day or two after the election, okay? This is where this thing is going. Now, why do I say, why do you say that you think it's not going to be the 95,000 minimum, but you think it's going to be more closer to the hundreds of thousands, millions? Now, Cato Institute put out a report as well, like a year ago, this time, like about a year ago or so. So it's called Immigration Wait Times from Quotas Have Doubled. Green card backlogs are long, growing, and inequitable. This is crazy. Now, I knew about the wait times from a video I did like a year ago, but I just want to share this with you guys. During his presidential campaign, Donald Trump repeatedly promised that although he would build a border wall, it would have a door open to those willing to come to America legally. Now, why is it important? So we've talked a lot about illegal immigration in the public discourse. But what hasn't been talked about as much is the legal immigration, those that have been legally vetted to come into the United States. Wait until you see those numbers. So that number, it was the number was like 5 million. The last time I checked this. So the number of people waiting is like 5 million. So this is kind of like the preference categories that the immigration bureaus use to determine who they want to bring in. So they want people in that employment category you see. Priority goes to people that have bachelor degrees, advanced, exceptional, priority workers. Now, why is it important? Because that connects directly to that map that we were looking at with NPR. Because Indian Americans that come here, they have like national lotteries in their country. They're bringing the elite Indians for the most part. Doesn't mean that they get a couple of the unskilled, but for the most part, the way that the immigration policy is set up with the Indians in their own country, they have like these national lotteries and testing contests to determine in their own country who they're going to make priority to go to other countries to represent them. That's why when we had these conversations that compare Black Native population to others, you guys aren't understanding how it works in these other countries. They're not sending their worst on average to in a lot of these countries. A lot of these countries, they're trying to send their best so that when they get here, they'll be in the jobs in Silicon Valley. So when they bring over their families, they're coming into a situation where they're not coming as a refugee. Whereas some countries, they bring in lots of refugees, but other countries, they want to bring in the skilled because, again, it establishes a foundation. So if you got like an uncle, you say, and you in India, and he makes it to the colleges in India, he wins his lottery to come here through his country. That person's an elite person when they get here. So when they come, because there's a preference for bringing in family members because they already vetted one person. Like, okay, well, this person is good. They're solid. They're doing well. Let them bring in another relative, maybe a wife, maybe a sister or something like that, whatever. But they're already stable because they're coming into the jobs that are paying $100K from jump. So that's what's important about this. But the waiting list currently for legal immigrants into the United States is 5 million, man. 5 million. They have 5 million people on the list, on the waiting list right now, trying to get into the United States. And you got Biden saying, at a minimum, we're going to bring in about 100K. Stop it. That's why look at the terminology that they used. Minimum. The minimum is just the floor. The ceiling, they didn't say anything about the ceiling, though. So I'm predicting based on the waiting list. And when you combine what we know about this chart that's on the screen, I'm betting that we'll look back 5 years today and we'll find out that 100K that they're claiming that they were going to bring in annually at a minimum is probably closer to like 300K because you got a waiting list of 5 million people that are already vetted. While at the border, you got who knows how many people coming in every year illegally. So naturally, you're going to give a preference, and because it looks bad now to have all these people coming in illegally, but then you got 5 million vetted, skilled labor types waiting to get in this country from the other 194 countries on the planet. You dig? So there's like 195 countries in the world, but a lot of people are trying to get into the United States for the economic benefits that they can send back to their countries, because you got that dual citizenship thing going on. So that's kind of where we're at with the legal immigration, 5 million waiting. So if you guys want to look up that report, you can go to Cato's website, punch in, I'm going to take this down, immigration wait times from quotas have doubled. So take a look at that. So they got like a long and growing list of immigrants ready and waiting. They was waiting for Biden to get in there because they're about to make a strong case to let me in because they're going to show them this chart. If I'm an Asian American advocate, think about how easy the case is to make. I'm sitting in front of Joe Biden. I say, look at Joe. Look at what my people from Vietnam are doing. They're performing in the United States. If I'm Vietnamese and I go to Joe Biden, look at where my people are, that they're doing good in this country. We're above the 60K median. We're pushing towards 80K. We need you to bring in more. Then you go over here to India. Who has the strongest case? Indian American. Why do you think Kamala Harris is the vice president? Not for the reason that you think. Because that other half that she represents, like her father, her mother's side of the group or whatnot, this is what they're bringing to the politicians, even though their numbers are smaller. They'll just say, hey, look at how my people are performing. Indian America, we're killing it right now. We're about to hit 140K average income as a group. And they're going to say to Joe, you know what? You need to bring in another million of my people because we're going to take over every job there is in IT. So that's the kind of case that's being made, whether you like it or not. And again, I, like many others, I didn't know these numbers, man. I didn't know that this is what it actually looks like. I definitely thought that the Chinese had the highest income, but they're in the middle of the pack for the most part. They're in the top 5, but the Filipinos and the Taiwanese are equal. And again, Taiwanese is Andrew Yang's people. So let me go back through. I'm gonna check in with the chat again, see what see where you guys are following along. Turbato says they are already overlooking anchor babies. Yeah. Brian Washington says that's just the ones they're talking about. Gushy says they can have my spot. I'll be leaving the U.S. as soon as my kids graduate from college. Yeah, I heard a lot of brothers that are making that move too. Some just said, I want to go somewhere different. But again, whether you leave or not, your money, you can make your money anywhere on the planet depending on your job, especially if you got, as you see, skills will travel. That's one of the things that you notice when you look at that map that is proven. Skills will travel, and STEM skills definitely, but just skills. Countries they have a demand for that. And if you're a country like America who claims that it's in a labor shortage right now, which that's what their data that they're putting out says, that they have a labor shortage, then they're dying for skills right now. And I suspect that if the United States is dying for skills, probably other G20 countries are looking for talent as well. So Gushy says they aren't good engineers. I'm just saying, you know more than I do. Funny, the circumstances for anchor babies was originally for the children of slaves to be given citizenship. It was only meant for black slaves. Yeah, there's so many things that, I mean, the black majority falls for anything, bro, because it's all emotionality. Because again, even those of us that try to stay pretty informed, I'm seeing in the chat that a lot of you are surprised by these numbers. So that tells us we got to kick into another gear. As individual blacks, we got to kick this shit into another gear going forward this decade, bro, because this is looking ugly, man. This is looking ugly. And I know that there's certain states that are passing like heartbeat bills and things like that, where they're trying to push that Roe v. Wade to the Supreme Court to make them make a decision on these past first-term abortions. So maybe they're trying to slow down some of the trends, but I think that's more trying to slow down the trend for white women having abortions. But with the black women, we already know what time it is. They're going to fight that as hard as possible. But I mean, as these numbers look, bro, this is where this thing is. So it says that Indian American households are the highest earning group with a median household income of $127,000 a year. On the other end of the scale, Burmese American households are the lowest earning group with a median household income of $46,000 a year. And like I was just saying to you guys, man, 10 years ago, the median for the United States was way closer. It was closer to like probably 50K or something like that just 10 years ago. And probably 20 years ago that was the average, probably like 40,000, 48K or something. So the Burmese, even as the lowest earning group within the Asian demographic, they're moving up pretty damn quickly, considering that they're the lower group. And it says that a 2018 Pew Research Center study found that Asian Americans were the most economically divided racial or ethnic group in the United States, with Asian Americans in the top 10th of the income distribution, making 10.7 times more than those in the bottom 10th. So the next myth they said was Asian Americans immigrate to the United States in the right way. So NPR says that more than half of those who identify as Asian American and at least 17% of Pacific Islanders were born outside the U.S., according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The Asian American community has the highest proportion of immigrants of any ethnic or racial group in the United States. I mean, I'm telling you, bro, we've been misled. Almost, I bet you most people, if you ask them that question, who has the highest proportion of immigrants of any ethnic group, almost everyone would say, I bet you'd get about a 75% number would say Latinos. Because I know I would say Latinos. But we're wrong. We were wrong the whole time. Yet Asian Americans are often overlooked in debates about immigration reform. Again, even NPR is admitting they're overlooked in debates about immigration reform. Asians have a wide range of reasons for immigrating to the United States, including those coming as refugees or asylum seekers. Out of the almost 11 million estimated undocumented immigrants in the U.S., around 1.5 million are from Asia, according to the Migration Policy Institute. So they got another chart here. Large number of Asians in America are unauthorized immigrants. So again, obviously Mexico we have the most. So this is a chart official. Again, this is official chart. So we don't know if these numbers are conservative, which I suspect they are. It shows that a large number of Asian American are unauthorized immigrants, and it shows where the biggest populations of unauthorized immigrants are coming from. So Mexico is around 5.5 million, but we know that's conservative. El Salvador, 750K. Guatemala, 588K. But then India, who would have known that India has 469K unauthorized immigrants? I bet most of you didn't think that. Honduras, 402K. China, what's going on with all these Chinese unauthorized immigrants? 394K. Oh, okay. I wonder. And you remember how they had that big scandal that broke in politics because you had all those Chinese scientists selling information and spying and sleeping with white politicians, and that just happened this year. Now you know why. You got damn near 500,000 of them unauthorized in the country right now, and everyone keeps blaming the Latinos because I'm guilty. I would have never thought this chart was true. Dominican Republic, 191,000 unauthorized Dominicans in the United States. Colombians, 182K. Brazil, 145K. So it says that heightened immigration enforcement has also impacted Asian Americans. From 2015 to 2018, Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrested about 15,000 immigrants from Asia. The report also found that Southeast Asian immigrants were 3 to 4 times more likely to be deported for old criminal convictions compared with other immigrant groups. Now, you guys know why that is. So you say, it's obvious, because America's about that money, right? Now, we see that they said that the Southeast ones, those would be the ones in this quadrant, the Samoans, the Vietnamese, the Burmese, they're the ones that are getting all the deportations. Wow. Now, tell me this is not funny. Indians have the highest rate of unauthorized immigrants, but the ones being deported are in this lower quadrant. I'm going to tell you why. Because the Indians are bringing the skills to pay the bills, and they have the highest income. So they catch one of these Indian Americans, and he's like, he can get an immigration attorney. He can get the best immigration attorney. She can get an attorney. So they're unauthorized, but they're going to be able to fight their cases. So the higher that income goes up, the easier your ability to fight that immigration case is going to be. It is what it is. It's a zero-sum game in America like that now. It just is what it is. So this next myth says, but I wanted to speak about the Andrew Yang situation for a minute, though, because I think that's important as well to talk about as well. So when you look at the situation with Andrew Yang right now, so we know that the Democratic primary in New York is coming up on 22 June. So June 22nd, they're going to be having a Democratic primary in New York. So I think the last Republican mayor of New York was Rudy Giuliani, I believe. It was either Rudy Giuliani or the rich dude. Well, who was the last Republican mayor? Because it was Rudy Giuliani. Then it was the other guy that tried to run for president that's super rich, Bloomberg, right? I don't know which one was the last. So it was Giuliani or Bloomberg was the last Republican. So we know that for the most part, New York is in a very strange situation right now because with the new census data come out, New York actually lost a House seat while Texas gained a seat and Florida gained seats down there in Texas. Shout out to the brother Wagner. Appreciate the contribution, brother. And, thanks for riding with me on this during this conversation. So we know that New York lost the House seat because they're losing population because of the way that their city is set up, the way that their states are set up, high taxes, politically correct, woke communism. And it's a lot of people with money say, hey, I'm out of here. So it's a lot of people leaving California, New York with money because we always get caught up in just the whole number. The whole number is not what the states are worried about as much. They're worried about as far as seats, but they're worried about those dollars and who is moving out. So we have a big flow because some of the states want to get rid of certain parts of their population, which you can see New York is getting rid of a lot of their black population, forcing them down to Georgia, Carolinas. But a lot of the money is going to Texas and Florida, which is Texas gained like 2 or 3 seats this census, and Florida gained like 1 or 2 seats. So they're winning, and these other states are losing. So Andrew Yang, he's sitting there as a Taiwanese American in New York at a time when the Brooklyn Nets new owner, as quiet as it's kept, is a Taiwanese American. It hasn't really been discussed that much, but the new owner of the Brooklyn Nets is a dude named Jose, and he was a business partner of Jack Ma at Alibaba as like one of the original group of founders of Alibaba. So he's like a billionaire Taiwanese American, and he bought the Brooklyn Nets for $2.3 billion in August 2019. And we know that the Brooklyn Nets are the 7th most valuable franchise in the NBA right now. And that was the numbers before COVID with the whole thing with Durant now and James Harden. I'm quite sure that when the new numbers come out in 2022, because again, you know that the NBA is trying to expand now to Vegas, Seattle, most likely. And we talked about that last night on the panel as well. But they're looking to expand to make up for their losses during COVID. So the Nets, by getting Harden, Kyrie, and Durant, their valuation is probably going to be more closer to $4 billion when the new numbers from Forbes come out next year. So be looking out for that. But again, that dude is a Taiwanese American, and he's right there in New York. Andrew Yang's a Taiwanese American, so you know what time it is. And you look at New York's demographics that are changing as well. So in New York, the census said that they were at 8.4 million people. But again, they're losing population, but the people that are staying are certain groups. So I noticed that the Asian population in New York was at 14%. So it's growing in New York. You see what I'm saying? The Asian population is growing in New York. Their Black population is shrinking. So with the new census, they showed that the New York Black population was at 24%. And we know that New York City has a big mixture of diasporan Blacks up there. But I had to really look at that number with the Asians again, 14%. So their numbers are double. It's highly concentrated in New York versus how it is in the whole country. So they're very concentrated where they're at, and they're taking over in certain places. So based on what I'm seeing with the numbers of Asian Americans and how they attach themselves to whatever's convenient to push their power, I'm taking my bet and saying that Andrew Yang's going to win that mayoral election. So what do you guys think? Do you see, because again, whoever wins the Democratic primary a month, 3 weeks from now, is pretty much going to be the mayor, I'm suspecting, unless it's a big surprise. Because again, I know New York has had Republican mayors recently, but from the trend that I'm seeing, I'm betting that it's more likely whoever wins that Democratic primary is going to be the mayor. And based on just looking at this number, not knowing anything about Andrew Yang, but understanding the nature of how this group is able to utilize the energy of the Black vote. Because Blacks at this point, let's just be honest, 9 out of 10 Black women voted for Biden. 8 out of 10 Black men voted for Biden. So let's just be damn honest. The Democrats got a hell of a hold on the Black mind and the Black vote, bro. It just is what it is. They can harness that vote, man. They just put that Democratic branding on the Black vote so much that they're gonna go. So I'm betting that Andrew Yang wins. What do you all think? Do you guys think that Andrew Yang will win the election, or do you think that another Democrat will win, or do you even think that it could be a surprise where Republican, seeing the trends where they're losing so much that they say let's put in a Republican like a Giuliani or a Bloomberg? What do you all think? Do you think Yang wins, or do you think they go in a completely different direction, or you think that one of the other Democrat that's part of the political machine wins? Because Andrew Yang, he doesn't have any political experience. He's kind of like a Trump type guy, where he's had good branding, good marketing. He's put himself in the right position to have a popularity and a name recognition. But you know how that whole thing works with the insiders that have been in the politics for like decades and decades, and how they work together. So governor of the Death Star says Yang will be the next NYC mayor. Gushy says, so it looks like the majority of people that's saying that they think it'll be Yang. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you all. So we'll see. That primary is on June 22nd. So unless there's some kind of shocker in New York where they vote for a Republican in the general election, I think Andrew Yang will be the next mayor. And again, think about that. So the mayor at a time when they're trying to push for even more and more immigration could be Andrew Yang, a Taiwanese American, in a city with a growing Asian American population. So based on what we know about Biden's plan from the NPR chart, I would pretty much say that you can expect that if Andrew Yang wins New York, I'm placing a bet right now that says the black population in 2030 in New York will be closer to 10%, and the Asian population, they're going to switch positions. I'm betting that based on the 2020 census, that if Andrew Yang wins, knowing his connection to the Bidens and all that, and knowing what we saw in the immigration wait list, I'm betting that the black population numbers in New York City specifically will switch between the Asians. So again, that number was 24% and 14% for the Asians. So I'm thinking it's going to flip. And by 2030, the Asian population in New York City will be closer to 25%, and the black population will be closer to 14%, even probably 10%. But again, if you've ever been to New York, you know that a lot of those blacks that are there are like servants of the rich in New York, because that shocked me. That was weird coming from the Midwest and being out in New York City. Something that I noticed, like when I would be out and about, I would see it was like some slavery looking shit from my perspective as a Midwesterner, where I would see like these women carrying around white kids. So they were like black Caribbean women. And they would be like nannies to all these rich white people. And I would see them out with their strollers, and it would be like this black woman, and she's pushing like baby strollers of pure white children. And I saw them all over New York on the time that I went there. And that was kind of a surprise to me as a Midwesterner, because I had never seen no shit like that in person. But it was a lot of like Caribbean people that are like servant class, like some house Negroes on a plantation to the whites in the city. So now what I'm saying is that I think we're going to be seeing a lot of black Caribbeans, the ones that remain in New York City. They're going to be the help of the Asian class that's growing in New York City. 2030, the only remaining blacks that you're going to see in New York City are those that are the top 1%. But the others that are there, they're going to be the servant class of the remaining whites, but of this growing population of Asians. Because again, remember, the Indian Americans, then you got these Taiwanese Americans. I'm betting by 2030, if Yang wins, when you go to New York City, you're going to see a lot of Asians being pushed in their baby carriages by the black help from the Caribbean. So that's what I'm saying. I saw it when I was up there. So this chart is pretty crazy. So the next myth about Asian Americans, it says that they face less systematic racism and discrimination. That's a myth. Now, this is where you get like this whole violence against Asians, Stop Asian Hate campaign that just came out of nowhere, since November, just out of nowhere. Everyone's attacking Asians. They're discriminating against Asians. We got to do something for the Asians. We got to throw billions and billions of dollars to protect the Asians. Asian Americans face less systematic racism and discrimination. So it says, since the coronavirus pandemic started, hate crimes and violence against Asian Americans have increased. In an April survey conducted by the Pew Research Center, 32% of Asian Americans, adults, a greater percentage than any other racial or ethnic group, said that they feared someone might threaten or physically attack them. So that's what the survey said just a month ago. And we know that May is Asian American month, right? They were saying that a third of Asian American adults were in fear that they will be physically threatened. I've never seen them be concerned to this extent about any other group. I've never seen this. I've never even seen them be this concerned about white people since Jim Crow. I've never seen this level of concern for any group in my living life. I'm sure that during Jim Crow, the concern was for whites, but I've just never seen something like this before. And they're so afraid that, and again, you know how they put black people as the face of everything. So we know that they already put blacks as the face of this Asian hate thing. But that's what they're saying, that a third of Asian adults are afraid that some Negro, American Negro, is going to attack them. So they move fast when it comes to these other groups, man. It's a lot that you as an individual black man can learn from this data about what's coming, because I think it's important to know and have some foresight into how things are changing and having a pulse when it changes, because we get so distracted by other things that are not important. We're in a very competitive environment. We're going to be in the most competitive environment we've ever seen in our lifetimes now that all this COVID stuff is dropping now. All the mandate. My state fully opens up on June 1st. So the governor already took away the mask mandate, but the businesses now, they take away all the mandates starting on June 1st. And I know other states is between June and July. So when this COVID thing is over, you're going to see the most competitive environment that you've ever seen in your life. Now, that's a lot of opportunity, though, at the same time. So it just depends on how you were moving during the last 14 months during this COVID lockdown. But you're about to find yourself where you like on some rocky shit, in training, running in the Russian outback, hitting the heavy bag, getting your sweat on while everything was down and out and it was in chaos? Or was you on some straight clown shit and you're going to be in the same position or worse when everything opens up in July? So I'm just letting you know, bro, it's going to be good and it's going to be bad. So it just depends on how you positioned yourself during this lockdown. If you thought they were just going to keep giving stimulus into the world, end it, you were wrong. Because again, they already have, half of the states have already canceled their stimulus programs for labor, because they surely gave businesses that PPP money. But the labor force, oh, they cut them off. They said, you taking your butt back to work. And that's half of the states. That was just in the last week or two that they did that. So shit, in another week, probably the rest of the states will have dropped all the stimulus stuff. So that conversation will pretty much be removed going forward because they say that they have a labor shortage. So Asian Americans and other groups report negative experiences since the start of the pandemic. And we know that they just put out a report, and this just came from the leftist news, admitting, because all during COVID, they censored anyone saying that COVID came from China. But now, all of the news networks, now that they got Trump out of there, they're saying, oh, Trump was right. Yeah, which we already knew, of course. It started in China. But now that we got what we want, we got everything positioned. We got the Asian Hate Act now. We got our man in there. Yeah, Trump was right. It came from Wuhan, China. So what? Moving on. We're moving on now. So that's where that whole thing is. So this is kind of a chart showing violence during the pandemic that Asians say that it was against them compared to what other groups. So we see on the chart that it says that, so you got the red represents the Asians, the blue, black, turquoise, Hispanic, the yellow, the white. So it says that 24% of whites experienced at least one of four some kind of violent incident against them during a pandemic. This is what they're claiming. You know, whites be on that Karen shit though. So I don't know, man. When you got all these Karens that was showing up during the pandemic, lying on people, was it really a quarter of white people that was getting assaulted during the pandemic? Then with the Hispanics, it's like the victim Olympics. When you look at these graphs, man, it's like the victim Olympics. So the Hispanics, like they said that 40% experienced at least one of four incidents. So they said the Hispanics, you know, 40% of them saying that something happened to them during the pandemic. I guess I'm the only one that stayed out of trouble during the pandemic. Because when I went for my jogs, even when things were locked down, I just kept a little pocket knife with me. And I was cool. I saw other violence and rioting and things, but it didn't happen to me. So Asian Americans claim that 45% of them experienced the incident. But now this is what's funny. Now, again, look at the graph. Black. 52% of blacks said they experienced an incident, but it's no focus on it, though, ever. So over half of blacks said they experienced some kind of bad incident, but no one cares. But the Asians, 45% of the Asians said they scared to walk the streets because all of those amigos are out there robbing people and beating them down. Let's get this bill through in 60 days. So looking at the chart, it said that this is showing us the numbers of people that feared that they might be attacked or threatened during COVID. So you see where the whites are. So the whites didn't really fear the physical part of it as much, but then you have Asians, a third of them said they feared being attacked. Now, this is the more subjective one. This one on this part of the chart says people acted as if they were uncomfortable around them. So this, I swear to God, thank you, NPR. This is one of the greatest charts I've seen in the prior years. This is a great, well put together, informative chart, man, and with the graphics. So white people said they didn't think anyone was uncomfortable. Of course, they got the white privilege, so they probably feel like people are begging to be around them at the rate that people worship them in 2021. Asians and Asians and Hispanics were tied in their victimhood. So about a third of them, just about a third, believe that people acted uncomfortable around there. So this is basically, you know, you go to like the supermercado in your neighborhood, and these Hispanics, like about a third of them are claiming that you gave them a dirty look. That's basically what that boils down to. It's subjective as hell. So they're basically saying that they're getting dirty looks from you amigos, because the whites are like, hey, it seems pretty great to be white to me in 2021, right? Now, blacks, again, this chart is so amazing because what it shows is the position of blacks in this country, bro. They are becoming the most marginalized and alienated group in the country that they have the oldest foundation to. They have the strongest anchor, even a bigger, stronger anchor than the whites. because people forget that the United States was not founded until 1789 officially. So blacks are the anchor in this country. But if you look at this chart, they are becoming the mules, and a mule that's on a reservation somewhere. So it says that 4 out of 10 blacks said that people acted uncomfortable around them. That's critical. So basically, blacks are saying that when I'm out in public and things, people don't want to be around me. So pushing towards 50%, blacks are claiming, at least that when I'm out and about, when I go grocery shopping, people don't seem like they want me there. They're not comfortable around me. It's double that for Asians and Hispanics. So blacks they're 2 times more likely to feel that other people are uncomfortable around them. That's a critical thing to think about too. But of course, whites are the ones, they feel like everything is pretty much great. So when we get to the been subject to racial slurs or jokes, whites, I got to stop for a second. How many of you really believe that just about 10% of whites have been called a racial slur? These whites that have been served by NPR are claiming that they've been called a racial slur. Do you guys really believe it's 10% of white people are being called racial slurs out here? Because I ain't never seen it for the most part. What do you guys in the chat think, man? Do you guys believe that the white folks, are they being racially slurred out here, 10% of white people on a daily basis? Because I don't believe that statistic, but hey, it is what it is. So the Hispanics, 20% of them believe, they claim that they've been subject to a racial slur during the last 14 months. It's 24% of Hispanics. So I could see more with the Hispanics and blacks. So that was pretty close. Like the racial, I could really believe that a quarter of blacks and Hispanics are receiving racial slurs. I could believe that because we got a lot of Karens and Todds out here that when they get angry, you'll hear them out sometimes, like, you know, the N word or the W word for the Latinos or whatnot. So I could believe that about a quarter of blacks or Latinos have been slurred since the pandemic. I could believe that. But again, it's funny that blacks and Hispanics are the ones receiving the slurs, yet Asians around 19%, but they're getting all the attention. They got all the attention on them, yet they're the second least likely to get called a racial slur. This is insane. Thank you, NPR, because I know how this internet shit works. They're probably going to scrub this article now that they know that regular black folks on social media is reading this. Bro, this article ain't going to be there. This is going to be the new OkCupid article to get scrubbed. Because remember how they scrubbed the OkCupid that showed the racial preferences and the 500,000 people and what they were doing in their behavior? They scrubbed that shit from the internet. Luckily, I archived the copy. But you guys better save a copy of this while you can, because you can believe that when YouTube and others find out that regular black folks is reading this shit, they're going to scrub this article. It's too much good information in here. It's too much real important economic and political information in this article. This is rare in 2021. So on this part, I try to say someone made a remark that they should go back to their home country. So whites said only 2% of whites claim that someone told them to go back. Stop it. I'm not believing these white people. They just threw the white people here for no reason. Dude, I've never heard someone say, but maybe this is like a regional thing. Maybe like if you're in New York, I could maybe see, because they have different whites from European countries. But I've never in my life seen a black person say to a white person, for example, take your white butt back to England or something. I've never heard that. Have you guys ever heard that? Maybe if you live in New York City or something, I could see possibly. But I ain't never heard no one telling white people to go back to England or Italy or Ireland and eat potatoes. I've never heard that in my life. So I don't know about this white data. I don't know, man. So it says that, so it was about tied for Asians, blacks, and Latinos. They were about tied in regards to people telling them to go back to their home. So yeah, there are those Karen and Todd types that might tell a black person to go back to Africa, but it's rare because they know damn well that blacks have been here before they're immigrant. So they pretty much don't use that one. They're more likely to go the racial slur route or call the police, you know, walking while black kind of situation. But so that was about tied for the blacks, Asians, Latinos when it comes to someone telling them to go back to their home country. So I could see, I'm not surprised at all with the Latinos, because I do know people that tell Latinos to go back to their country because they see them as illegal immigrants, which again, we know that at a minimum, there's like almost 6 million illegal immigrants. And that number is, that's a conservative number. So the last one said someone expressed support for them. So this is a positive. So they're saying So again, the white people are the victim in this one. So now the whites are the victim, right? So the whites are saying that only 22% of other groups express support for us as white people during the pandemic. Stop it. If you want to get some white love, come on social media and see how much white love is out there for you. If you're a white man or a white woman, you ain't on social media, because all I hear is people caping for you on here and how much they love you and want to be next to you. But yet white people are feeling neglected. Y'all stop neglecting those white folks out there. White people said they had the lowest support out there. They said only 22% of you amigos are showing y'all love. You got to be more expressive. You got to show more of the pearly whites when you're out in public, black folks, because these white people are feeling low self-esteem right now. The Asians is getting all the money now. Even though the whites own all the land and the resources still, the whites don't like that the Asian income is surpassing them in them test scores. They're not feeling loved out here, people. Give Karen and Todd a nice big coon smile when you're in public. So the Hispanics said that they were getting about 31. Wait, now that is funny. Now, okay, that's the Hispanics and that's the Hispanics, yeah. So Hispanics said that about a third of them said that someone expressed support for them, and about a third of Asians said that someone expressed support. So that's interesting, because it was a third of the Asians saying that they were scared of being attacked, but another third said that they have gotten support. So if you think about it, it makes sense, because with all this attention on Stop Asian Hate and all these different campaigns, there has been a lot of support for them publicly expressed, especially in the social media campaigns. Now, blacks, again, they go to black folk. Black folks said that 49% of them felt some sort of support was given to them during the pandemic. So that kind of makes sense from the standpoint of, we saw with the Black Lives Matters campaigns and all these social activism from corporations during this woke period, but they're pretty much shutting that down right now. So it kind of makes sense that half of blacks felt some kind of support, because they are media focused. So it would make sense that if they're seeing images that are saying we love black people, or black female power type things, black girl magic being put out there in the images on the internet and advertising, then they would take that as reality, even though we know, hey, that ain't reality. You just been, again, pandemic had the country locked down. So most of this information has to be coming from an online basis for the most part, because most of the country was locked down and public socializing was to a minimum for the last 14 months. So it's interesting that blacks will say, I've been getting all this support during the lockdown because of the good marketing campaign of these corporations, I guess. So we closing out this article. It just goes on to say that the House of Representatives passed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act on May 18th. The bill would have the Justice Department appoint a point person to expedite the review of hate crimes related to COVID-19. That is a cover. That is a cover. When they see what I'm saying, COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. No, call it what it is. The Asian American Alleged Hate Crimes Act. That's what the name should have been. They're trying to put the COVID title on there. No, stop it, man. This is hypocrisy what they do. And then right under they say, despite increased news coverage of various attacks against Asian Americans and the upcoming legislation, they say that they found that 37% of white Americans were not aware of increased incidents of hate crimes. So I swear, man, this media is something you got to really read between the lines with them, man. Even when they put out something real, they're always trying to see how closely you're reading. But I got the team in here today. We up early today on a Sunday, getting it in. So y'all not getting nothing past us with this one, bro, because we know y'all gonna scrub this from the internet. So the next myth goes on to say Asian Americans are fairly represented in leadership positions. They said that Asian Americans are underrepresented in these positions of power in American companies, politics, and media, holding about 3% of these positions in comparison with composing 7% of the U.S. population. See, that's what I mean about reading between the lines. They're so concerned about these Asian Americans not matching their numbers across these important, powerful sectors, but you don't never hear them talking about blacks in any aggressive way like that. They don't be like, oh, well, black Americans are 12% of the population, but they only represent 1% of the corporate jobs or the top tier. No, they don't do that. And this is why I'm saying this article is critical for you black Americans out there falling for this black, brown, yellow, people of color coalition. You better wake up and realize that America is about getting it. Get yours now. Get yours. And stop waiting for someone else to come and save you. Biden's not coming to save you. The Hotep communists not coming to save you. Corporate woke is over with because they lost so much money from the corporate woke shit. They're not going to come to save you, bro. You the lens and the camera is off of you now, and the spotlight is on the Asian Americans and Latinos. And I have a feeling that this Indian Americans, look at this chart, they're about to blow up in the next 2 or 3 years. The Indian Americans, we're going to see them move from specifically talking about umbrella of Asian American to more focusing on Indian Americans. Just mark my words, because you already know you got like guys like Bobby Jindal or that female Nikki Haley in politics. They're going to see their names kind of emerging in the next 2 years. Then you have that chick Tulsi Gabbard. She's been making a lot of noise because they're saying that she's about to move from the Democratic to the Republican Party, and that's going to be a huge political conversation when that happens in a couple months. So you're going to start seeing more of a shift in these conversations from the general, and they're going to start specifically highlighting these Indian Americans, and they're going to move off the Latinos because they already pretty much gave them what they're going to get, open up that lane for them, but they're about to start focusing on these Indian Americans. Oh, this is the model minority, this Indian Americans, blah, blah, blah. So it says that Asian Americans have the lowest degree of representation in political office compared with any other racial or ethnic group. See what I'm saying? We got to get these Asian Americans in these political positions. We have to. It's our mission to do it. We don't need the Asian Americans to tell us that it needs to be done. We're going to do it. That's amazing how they're so happy to make sure that they put the Asian Americans where they believe that they deserve to be at. They have no problems with it. So here's a little chart they created. Asian Americans are the most politically underrepresented group. So they show that they have like a 46%, a negative 46% in terms of representation in numbers. No, 85. Whoa. So blacks are negative 43%. See this, now you guys see what I'm saying, bro. Look at this chart, right? Here's where the blacks are, here's the whites. I like how they use that image of a cocky white person. That exactly what I would think of too. They're sitting in their very cocky, privileged position right here. 46% overrepresented, the whites. Now look at the blacks again. So blacks are at negative 43%. But you're not going to see them putting this kind of effort to see. Now look at, they got the Native Americans, 73% negative, negative 82% for Latin, negative 85% for the Asian Americans. Now you see what I'm saying. Now you know why they've had so much focus on this Asian American conversation, because they're trying to put that negative 85% into the positive for the Asian Americans. So what they're going to be doing, this leftist specifically, they're going to be putting a lot of focus in these corporations. They're going to be putting a lot of focus on saying people of color. And guess what people of color really means? Asian American out. I'm saying it on record. When you hear that term, people of color, for the next 2 or 3 years, just in your mind, they're saying Asian American, kind of saying Latino, but they're mostly saying Asian American, because you're going to see them saying, well, you know, we gotta get the Asian Americans. They're negative 85% representation. We got to put our focus on getting guys like Andrea. And that's why I think Andrea Yang's going to win, because they're letting you know that, oh, they're negative 85% underrepresented. We got to get them in office. That's where their focus is at. They're not worried about that negative 43% for blacks. Not worried about it, because they know that the majority of blacks is going to put their vote behind that negative 73% for Native, that negative 82% for Latina, and that 85% for the Asian Pacificers or whatnot. They already know. Not worried about you, dude. So let me see what the last. So that's it for the article. It closes by saying that despite these perceptions, Asian Americans are pushing forward. Asian Americans increased their voter turnout rate by more than any other racial or ethnic group in the 2020 election, and in part helped Joe Biden win Georgia. In that same year, 158 Asian Americans ran for state legislatures, the highest number since the 2018 midterm. So close that out. I really do appreciate you brothers and the others in the chat sticking with me through this one. This was a long article to get through, but I do think it's critical that we get this one on record, because this is just one of those rare ones that you'll find. It's very unusual and rare for the mainstream media to put out something like this. From what I've seen, it's just rare. It's such a great in-depth article, but you kind of see where the trends are going. And again, I just think that you guys have to put yourself in a position to win going forward, because it's been proven that these other groups, whatever model they're using, that model is actually winning. They've figured out something that works in this country, and it's to focus on education. So when you see these fools out here arguing about they're actually supporting taking the students' standards down for black kids, you better open your eyes, man. They are setting you up as black people for a total fall and a total isolation moving forward. They're out here raising the standards for everyone else, and they're telling black people, you're too dumb to pass these standardized tests. So we're gonna get rid of standardized tests, using you again as a mule so that they can get whites into those seats that they're losing to Asians, and blacks aren't gonna have no seats. There ain't gonna be barely no seats for blacks, especially not native blacks. The only seats that's gonna be for blacks are gonna be coming from immigrants. So with that, you guys have a great Memorial weekend. You got a couple vacation days in there, and we'll chop it up again on the next topic. But with that, I'm out.